Judy Collins, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
You've been on this musical journey for quite some time, and I'm wondering, what are your earliest musical memories?
I'm writing another book, so I've been dwelling there most mornings, and one of the vivid memories I have is waking up to my father tuning the piano on a Saturday, because one of the things that he did, you know, my father was blind, and he was blind from the age of about 4, but by the time he was in his school, they taught you everything. They taught you piano tuning, they taught you singing, reading, Braille, everything. He was equipped to do whatever. And then he would be singing, and he'd wake us up with usually a Dorothy Fielding song, you know, grab your coat and get your hat, leave your worries on the doorstep. And the sunny side of the street is, I think I went to hear a singer the other night, Ricky Lee Jones, was doing a series of songs from the Great American Songbook, and one of the ones she sang was on the sunny side of the street. So I would hear him singing, then of course he'd do his radio show, and maybe we'd get to hear him warm up for that. And sometimes he'd take us out to Hollywood when we were living in LA, and we'd get to see the radio shows being carried out with people who had little boxes of sand to walk in, so it sounds like you're doing a Western on the radio. So a lot of things about music, and of course we were read to all the time. And then I started playing the piano when I was 4 or 5, so it was always practicing. And that was very much a part of my life growing up.
Yeah. Did your father actively encourage you to play music, or did you just want to do it?
Well, it was a natural. You know, I wanted to play the piano, I wanted to sing, I wanted to do what he was doing. And by the time I started taking piano lessons, I was always practicing. I mean, after he tuned the piano on a Saturday, then I'd sit down and have my turn. It was interesting because practicing and playing Mozart and Beethoven and then Mozart and Rachmaninoff and so on, it kept me out of trouble, and it kept them out of my hair. I was the oldest of 5, so I had a lot of, there was a lot going on in my house all the time. Yeah. But everybody really respected my time alone at the piano, and I have a feeling that that was what saved my sanity, probably, and theirs.
Yeah. Playing music is one thing, but then performing to people is another. What was the catalyst that made you think, I want to be a performer?
Well, my first performance in public was, my father was touring in the Northwest, and he had a radio show in Seattle at that point, and we lived in Seattle. But then he had a break during the war. There was something called National Assemblies, and this was a music program, and it was very smart. It was Roosevelt's way of getting people who were musicians out on the road getting paid for their work, but also it gave high schools and colleges an audience for music that they might not have had. So my dad was part of that for a number, well, let's say 3 years, I would say at max. And I was 3 years old and then 4 years old, and so my first performance on the stage was in Butte, Montana, when he said to me one day, after, it was an afternoon concert, and there was an intermission, and he said, do you want to sing for these nice people? And I said, oh, sure, you know, what should I sing? And so I got on he said, well, sing what you know. And I sang, I'll Be Home for Christmas. And I sang it, and it was very exciting, and everybody clapped, but it was also April, so. But it was my first experience on stage, and it went very well. Yeah. So from then on, it was school shows, it was singing with the church choir, having solos with the school choir, performing with my teacher's orchestra. I was playing Mozart by the time I was 11. I was practicing the Mozart concerto, and then by the time I was 13, I was playing it with the orchestra. And so from then on, I was always doing something. I was on his radio show. I was on the school shows in my various schools, in grade school and junior in high school and high school. And then by the time I was in my late teens, I was seduced by folk music, and I got my father to get me a guitar, which he rented. I always say he was an optimist. And he rented a guitar, and I started out to play the guitar and learn This Land Is Your Land, among other things.
Yeah. Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, Lennon and McCartney were all songwriters that played a huge part in your career. All different songwriters. Is there something in common that they all have?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think they had in common that they were making a living doing music that was different than the 50s. You know, if you were growing up in the 50s, I had a job with a dance band in high school when I was 16, singing all the great pop standards, which I knew because of my father's. That's what he sang to make our living, Rodgers and Hart and Rodgers and Hammerstein. And, you know, I got to know people like George Shearing, who taught me how to play Laura on the piano, who was upset with me when I decided to play the guitar instead of playing Mozart. And so these guys, when I started listening to folk music at the Denver Folklore Society, I heard kids, young kids playing the guitar, singing songs, and then pretty soon I found out about the great folk scare, and I found out there was a Pete Seeger, a Woody Guthrie, and I moved to New York in 1960. Well, I played in New York in '61, and I knew Dylan when he started to write songs, and so I was the first among, maybe the first or the second to record his songs. And you said the Beatles as well.
Yeah.
And the Beatles were very much a part of our lives. Everybody knew them. By the time I was making my second and third album, they were coming out with In My Life, and by the time I was making my fifth album, I was recording In My Life. Again, it was young people with guitars, not too many of them. There were 4, but mostly there were 3 or 2 or 1. So it was a very attractive form, and it was simple. The Beatles, as I study them, I have a friend who listens to nothing but Beatles songs. They're all 3 minutes or under, until George Harrison comes along and ruins their track record by making 10-minute songs. But it was an efficiency of writing and singing, and an attractiveness in the melodic structure that was easy for us to follow. I'm sure it was very complicated by their orchestrator, but basically it was a simple chord structure to follow, and I think I can still play In My Life on the guitar, I'm not sure. But I was a pianist, and I continued to be and always have been a pianist, because once I stopped playing to learn folk music, I then learned within a couple of years that I better be playing the piano, because I couldn't write anything on the guitar. I was not particularly proficient. I could not do any of Joni Mitchell's various tunings, except for one, which I still use. It's a D tuning. It's the most famous and the most popular, because it's easy to get that bottom string to lower 3 notes, I think it is. But the rest of them are too complicated. And then, of course, she began to play electric guitar and have a tuner that would switch her into those tunings easily. She was a very sophisticated writer in terms of what she did with the guitars and the tuning. The high quality, high class tunings that she did. I was pretty basic. I could fingerpick pretty good and handle most anything that was ABC, and that made it easy for me to play the guitar. It still does.
Yeah. You've always been politically active, a humanitarian. Do you think that in the 60s and 70s the message of songs had more cut through than what they do today?
Well, it's hard to write a song that's going to last, that's actually an activist song, or a song that has legs to it and that has meaning to it and will motivate people to go out and march. I mean, the things that we always sang, We Shall Overcome, the Pete Seeger songs like Where Have All the Flowers Gone, and Pete Seeger's and Woody Guthrie's song, you know, This Land Is Your Land. They're easily part of that repertoire, but very hard to come by if you're going to try to write one, because they may last for 4 weeks, but that's not as long as they should if they're going to make a huge difference. I think that the idea of being part of the movement against the war in Vietnam changed a great deal in the country and in the world. I was always involved with that. And also at my dinner table, I was taught activism. My father was on the radio. He was playing and singing and telling stories, but he was also talking about Vietnam, and he was talking about McCarthy and MacArthur. And he was giving an audience a taste of what would later, well, McCarthy, I think, was always heavy in our community, because McCarthy ruined so many people's lives in the film industry, in the radio industry, in the entertainment industry. And being a commie and getting thrown out of your workforce was something that people could understand, because it was their bread and butter. And my dad was very much on the side of saying, if you see something, say something. If you can do something, pick up a leaflet, pick up a box that has a donation sign on it, and help people out. So that was something we all learned at the dinner table. There are 5 of us, and we also, all of us have maintained our activism in our lives and become left of the left of the left. I have a friend who's very active, and he said, when I go to your sister's house, I come away shaking because I know I'm not doing enough.
When Both Sides Now became the first of many hits for you, how do you look back at that time now? Were you able to enjoy it and take it all in at the time?
Not really. My life is so active, and it still is. So we go from one show to the next. I was always on the road from the time of 1959 when I started singing professionally. And yes, I recorded the song. I loved the song. I heard it on the telephone because my friend Al Cooper was spending some time with Joni at the club where Blood, Sweat and Tears was singing, and she was in love with the drummer, I think. And he followed her home, and she sang him some songs. And he called me in the middle of the night and put her on the phone and had her sing me Both Sides Now, which was a natural for me. And then I got her and Leonard Cohen, whom I'd met the year before, and Tom, I forget his name. What is his name? Tom, who wrote lots of songs. He wrote things like Bottle of Wine, Fruit on the Paxton. I got Tom Paxton and Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell and a couple of other singers onto the Newport Festival that summer, that fall really, the end of the summer of '69. And so, and then the song itself, Both Sides Now, was out then. And then I was saying to Catherine, it took my music company, Electorate, about 9 months to get the mix right so that the people on the radio would play it. But they finally started playing it and became a big hit. Meantime, I was touring. I was out there. I was working. I will say that after it became a hit, people answered my phone calls. That made a big difference.
Yeah. I read once that you had an interesting exchange with Janice Joplin at the Troubadour.
Yes.
I wonder if you could recall that story for us.
It was very odd. Well, I was always a drinker, and not anymore, but I was usually in my cups on any given night after a show, certainly. But Janice's drinking was very much public knowledge. You know, she talked about it and her use of alcohol and drugs a lot. So it was something that everybody knew about. I was with my friend John Cook, who became her road manager. I don't think he was the night we went together at the Troubadour, but he said, let's go over the Troubadour. We were going there to hear the singer who wrote, why are there so many songs about rainbows? can't remember his name right this minute, but I'll call you at night when I figure it out. And we went to hear him perform at the Troubadour. And we sat down, I sat down next to Janice, who was there, whom I didn't know, really. I mean, I knew of her, of course, we all knew of her, but she and I began to talk, and she said to me, you know, one of us is going to make it, and it's not going to be me. Those were her words to me. I was kind of blown away by what she said, but she somehow understood that we both had the same grizzly bear on our backs, and that one of us would get sober, and one of us did.
Yeah. When did you first become aware that Stephen Stills had written and was recording Sweet Judy Blue Eyes?
Well, I didn't know anything about it when he was writing it, and then we split up in about May of 1969. We had met in the fall, in the end of the summer of 1968, and so we were very much apart then, and he came to my birthday. He came to see me at my hotel in Santa Monica on May 1st of 1969, and he brought me a bunch of flowers and a present. He brought me a beautiful Martin guitar, which I still have, and he said, I have to sing you my new song. They were actually just about to start recording it, and I think that my friend Roland Sherman, who was doing the pictures for Life magazine, was in town for a couple of weeks doing pictures for that Life magazine piece. And so Stephen said, I have to play you this song, and he played me Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. And I thought, oh my God, what a song. And I said to him, it's a beautiful song, but it's not going to get me back. But we've remained friends all these years. And I just thought, oh my God, what a gorgeous song. I think that he's one of the best writers of anyone. He's certainly the best guitarist that I've ever known and had anything to do with. He came to play on an album called Who Knows Where the Time Goes at the end of '68 in the summer. And I did not know him. I knew I would be familiar with the Buffalo Springfield songs, but I didn't know him at all. And so he played on that album, and then I started to know his songwriting, and I still think that he's really one of the best writers in the business, and a phenomenal guitar player.
Yeah. You reunited with Stephen in 2018 for the album Stills and Collins.
Yes.
And there was another song called Judy.
Yes, I never heard it until we were working on that album, and I went back to this album which was made called Just Rolled Tape, which was gathered together of the songs that he'd written back then. I'd never heard that. And so I guess we recorded Judy on that album, didn't we? And we recorded a couple of other things. And on our concert tour, which followed the recording of that album, we did 115 shows in a year and a half. We were on the stage for 2 hours a night. Both of us sang everything together, except each of us had a single song that was solo. And then at the end of the concerts, we both sang Sweet Judy Blue Eyes together. It was hysterical, really. But we really had a good time. That was a great tour, great fun.
Your current album, Spellbound, is your first album to feature all of your songs on one album. Was there a different kind of satisfaction or pride in the completion of that album?
Well, last night at the She Rocks concert, a young singer did a tribute to me, and she sang When I Was a Girl in Colorado, which is one of the songs on this album, which is autobiographical, of course. And I was really smitten by that. It was very exciting to hear somebody sing that song. And I've had other artists cover some of my songs once in a while, but not often. I don't think. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. But it's pretty terrific. Nobody's re-recorded The Blizzard, which I would like to see. I think somebody, well, that's not true. John Denver called me the year after I wrote it and said, I want you to come to Colorado with me and play The Blizzard because I want to record it. And I said, I'm sick in bed with the flu, which I was, and I couldn't go to Colorado, which I didn't. And I did not know years later that he'd gone ahead and recorded it. He changed the lyrics and had the stranger be a woman. So he set it up for a romance. And he recorded it, but I don't think it was ever released. Was it ever released?
It has been released.
On an album?
It's been released after he passed away. His estate released it.
His estate released it, but it wasn't on an album, I don't think.
No.
So it didn't really have a life of its own. But that I would like to see some guy, for instance, Vince
Gill? Vince Gill?
Vince Gill recorded. I would pray that he did that.
Yeah.
It would be a perfect song for him. He doesn't know that. Just somebody will tell him.
Now he'll know.
Now he'll know.
Yeah. Judy, you're one of the great interpreters of songs. What are the elements in a song that you look for before you want to record a song?
Well, the first thing that counts is the chemistry. And if I hear the song and fall in love with it, that's it. I don't ever analyze it. I mean, I might put it on the record player and listen to it over and over again, along with some other things. And then the one that stands out after I've turned off the recording and walked away from it, the one that comes back into my mind and stays. But I have no way to analyzing what it is. It's probably a kind of remembrance of my own experience with songs with my dad, because he always chose the best songs in all the shows. And he would get recordings for the blind from the Library of Congress in these big boxes, and they'd come and he'd open them up and he'd hear the whole show and he'd pick the right song, always the right song. And I think that I heard a lot of songs that were really fantastic and had legs and would last forever. And I learned that from him, and I somehow put it together emotionally and intellectually and all the other ways that you go about learning a song and adopting it for your own. And then you put it in your mouth and you start to sing and it becomes yours. I don't know what that mystery is, what that chemistry is, I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of singer-guitarists, once they have success, they tend to put the guitar aside and just sing. Why has it been important to you to keep playing guitar on stage?
Well, it's a handy piece of business, if you forgive it. But it does things that aren't possible with the other instruments. It does fill a need. And I do occasionally put it down entirely. But I never have abandoned it. Well, I did for a little while. In 1968, 69, I recorded without it, and I performed without the guitar more than I had. But I think that it is somehow reminiscent of when we were a little more old-fashioned about our approach to music. And it helps me.
Yeah. Are you emotionally attached to your instruments, or are they just tools of the trade?
Oh, yes. Well, you know, I'm a pianist. So first of all, I've written everything, always on the piano, never on the guitar. I think I might have written 2 songs in my life on the guitar, but that's it. And they didn't go anywhere much of the time. But the piano's where I can write and where I can figure things out and where the landscape is mine to determine. That's not true with the guitar. I studied Korkazzi, I got the big books about guitar, and they never helped. It was getting my calluses taken care of that was the important thing, and playing 5 or 6 chords, which I probably still do. I can manage a capo, so I can get around on various keys, and I like the way it sounds. I like the 12-string. I switched. I used to be a pretty good finger picker in the old days. I learned carefully, and I was picking a storm with the guitar, finger picking. But when I heard I heard enough of Pete Seeger playing the 12-string that I found the attraction too much to resist.
Yeah. Martin Guitars honoured you with the signature guitar, 6-string and 12-string.
Yes.
How did you feel about that honour?
Well, it was wonderful. I met Dick Boak, and he wrote to me, I think, and said, we want to do a guitar for you. And I think he had done one for Joan Baez. I don't know who else. He did one for Woody, of course, or took Woody's, this guitar kills fascists, I think is what it said across the top. But he did one, not many for women, and I think I might have been his third. And so I was thrilled, and so we met and talked, and I got to know him very well. And so he did a beautiful job. It's a magnificent guitar. Its structure and his composition with the various woods and so forth is really based on the probably D45 that I played early on, the big 12-string.
Yeah. We were expecting you in Australia this year. It didn't happen.
Oh, and so
looks like you'll be coming out in next year in 2024. Yes. What can we expect from Judy Collins in 2024?
Lots of the new album, lots of the old classics. I'm sure that I'll have a chance to tour in a lot of the places I've been to. It looks like it's about a 3-week tour.
You've been to Australia quite a few times. What are your memories of the early tours to Australia?
I love Australia. I went to Australia first in 1966, and they were building the Opera House, and there was what was considered a thermometer in the middle of the Sydney Harbor, and the red line kept going up every time the cost of the Opera House increased. It got higher and higher and higher. It wasn't up yet, it wasn't finished, but the cost was growing. I'll never forget that. And I also just had a wonderful time touring. I think we got to New Zealand at that point, the first time I was there. But I've only been to New Zealand a couple of times, but I've been to Australia enough that it feels very much like home.
Yeah. You've done some...
Oh, excuse me, I have to tell you one thing.
Yeah.
We were at the Port Fairy Festival last time we were there, I think 10 years ago, maybe, I think 10 years ago. And this young girl came up to me at the festival and said, hi, and I know you, and so on. And I said, how do you know me? And she said, oh, I remember you from the Muppet Show. She must have been about 12.
Judy, you've done so much in your career. Are there any bucket list projects, things in the back of your mind you'd still want to do?
Well, I have started a new book, and I've wanted to write it for a long time. So that's always good to have another goal in mind. And I'd like to do some duets with other people that I haven't done. I did a duets album in 2017, 16, 17? 16, called Strangers Again. And I worked with Michael McDonald and Jackson Browne and Ari Hest and a lot of wonderful artists. Willie Nelson and I did a duet on that album. And it was a song that I had never heard by a writer that I never knew about named Dave Carter. I don't know how I missed Dave Carter. He's a fabulous writer. And I found a song of his called When I Go, and we were going through possibilities of what to record, and I called Willie and I said, what do you think about Dave Carter's When I Go? He said, oh, that's it, that's perfect. And actually our recording of that got me into the bluegrass charts, which is very exciting. Mm. So I'd like to do some more of that. I'd like to sing with Pavarotti, but that's probably not possible.
What are you most proud of in your music career?
Oh, getting here today, getting to this wonderful, getting anywhere. I mean, getting up in the morning, that's really the best part of the day, is when you get out of out of a dead sleep and you can have your coffee and say, I'm great today.
Yeah. Judy Collins, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait to get back down under.